My name is Aaron Weiss. I am on the board of Big Medium. Thank you everyone for coming to today's coffee chat. Um, as you may know, this program features leaders in the creative community sharing their personal and professional experiences to inspire others who are pursuing careers in art. Today, I'm very excited to have two visual artists whose work I think is beautiful, inspiring, and provides a needed perspective. Ryan Runcie and Dave McClinton, welcome.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Aaron. Well, I'm honored to talk with you today, Dave. I love your work.
Thank you.
I've been looking at it and just trying to, pull different understanding that I don't see with a lot of work. And so I'm excited to talk with everyone about Dave and get to interview him. He's been a very talented designer for over 2 decades, been working on his own personal bodies of fine art for at least half of a decade. And just to kind of see how the two overlap and how that has changed his outlook on art and the power behind art. I'm really excited to speak with him and get a chance to uncover some of that. Dave, would you like to say hi to everybody?
Yeah, good morning. And I don't have anything really introductory to say. Let's just dive in.
Sounds great. So when we look at your portraits, especially some of the portraits that we just saw, there's a lot of really cool digital elements that you use in your work. And I noticed they're mainly digital collages, correct?
Right.
Right. And so I see a lot of text. I see a lot of overlays and clipping masks, potentially from different textures that you found yourself, portraits and images of people that are probably in your life.
Right.
And some of what we talked about was, using images of yourself and family members. Could you kind of just build your process for us, kind of take us through how you make your work?
Sure. So most of the textures that you see are, we've all got a pretty decent camera in our pocket, right? On our phones. So I habitually just take pictures of textures all day long. Like if I'm walking around town or if I see something on the ground, on a sidewalk, a parking lot, whatever it is, and I just take those photos. And I don't really know how I'm going to use them, but they're there. So when I do sit down to make some work, I've just got a treasure trove of images, like just hundreds upon hundreds of things. So that's where the textures come from. The facial images come from family photos, archival images, found images, and my own face often. Like for instance, if I need a nose at a certain angle and I can't find it, I'll just shoot my own face and then stitch that into the work, because I'm going to manipulate it anyway. It almost doesn't matter the source, really. And all those faces are invented, an amalgam of several different faces. And just the other day, I was working on a piece where I needed the folds of a t-shirt hanging on a body. So I just scrunched up a t-shirt on my bed and took a photo of it and then manipulated that as though it were draped over someone's body. So yeah, it's really an amalgam of images collected over years, truly.
Wow. And it's one thing when I see your work and your attention to collage, I'd say there's more of a finesse or finish to the artworks. In terms of the portraits, they seem really well put together and composed. Would you agree with that? Or
yeah, there's that ongoing war inside me of whether or not I truly show the origin or the edges of the source material. So sometimes I do, and sometimes I don't care. But for the longest time, I was, as someone who's making work digitally, and coming from a studio background, painting and drawing, I had this sort of implied chip on my shoulder of being worried about whether or not I was going to be taken seriously by the art world. I'm using a computer. So I used to go out of my way to make sure that it wasn't necessarily obvious. And just over time, I've just sort of let that go, and it's just the work is the work, and what it means is what it means, and not to worry about how it was created necessarily. So there are a lot of instances where you can see edges of materials and things like that, and I just don't worry about it as much. But you're right, I do want it to feel like it's not just pasted on top of each other. I do want it to feel like it's a cohesive thing.
Right. And I really like that because it allows the viewer to kind of be pulled in, um, and kind of discover these things. You know, you see those colors and texture shifts, but to realize how they're kind of layered and really methodically blended at some points, it gives you more to see the more you try to dig into the work. And
Yeah,
go for it.
I didn't mean to cut you off. I was just gonna say, yeah, when you see stuff in person, when you see my work in person, there are so many little things that you can't see on social media. And that's kind of the shame of that. I try my best to sort of zoom in on things, but I love the idea that there are these hidden messages and hidden bits of symbolism that when you walk up to it and you see it, I'm not going to be there to explain it all, but you'll walk away with some sort of feeling of, I wonder where that came from, or I wonder what that means, that sort of thing. I love that kind of thing.
Yeah. And speaking of symbolism, when you really start to see your work, especially as a body of work, and you start to notice things like text or clippings from books or magazines running through the work.
Yeah.
And so to see how much context is in the content of your work, and that message that you're trying to, recapture lost histories, if you will, and retell those stories. Could you tell us more about that and that potency?
Yeah, there are certain bits of text that I can't just psychologically, I can't let go. There's something called the Toombs speech. It's Toombs. He was a Confederate senator, and he wrote this before the Civil War. He wrote this incredible speech justifying slavery and justifying the Confederacy, and it uses such intense language. And this was a speech given in front of, politicians. This, before the Civil War, and I'm just astonished that that type of language was used on the Senate floor. So I take snippets of that for a couple of reasons. One, I don't want it to be overlooked and forgotten. I want to remind people, hey, go look at this speech, go read this thing.
Mm-hmm.
But then when I'm juxtaposing that with images of Black bodies and Black faces, it's like in direct defiance of everything that this man was calling for. And I love splitting those things back and forth. And then when I find old, another thing that's astonishing to me is the slave ads and how they're just so matter of fact, from say 1850, and you'll see, someone selling a wheelbarrow, someone selling a mule and a cart, and then someone selling 8 people. And it's all just put together as though they're all the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And the idea that that family, probably being broken apart, was just thought of as, oh, well, here, hey, let me move this cart. Let me get a couple of wagon wheels, and let me grab a couple of people. And it's just so viscerally shocking to me. I mean, shocking is not the right word. I would say more infuriating. The idea that it was just every day. It was just thought of as, oh, this is just what we're doing. Like no one really argued with it, really.
Mm-hmm.
So then to take those words and recontextualize them, representing protest, representing pride, representing just the weight of America on the shoulders of the Black psyche, I really enjoy those two things being shown at the same time. And I also enjoy the sometimes over the top arguments and conversations that stuff starts. So yeah, that's kind of why I pull that stuff in, because it's so it's unavoidable. You can't not think of those things, and that's kind of what art's supposed to do, I feel like.
Yeah. I mean, just bringing that up, like fills me with emotions again, and like reminds me of why I do certain artworks and
Yeah.
why we're here to use our voice beyond, you know, our everyday callings. And so like thinking about that and thinking about how you've layered those messages is so impactful. And from your conversations, are there any that kind of stick with you that you've had with people, like trying to dive into this dialogue?
Well, it's interesting that so I think I related this to you earlier. So I was at a show and I had a really controversial piece like right over my shoulder. So as I'm facing the crowd walking by, I know where that piece is.
Mm-hmm.
So as people walk by, I know which one they're looking at. So if they're looking over this shoulder, I'm like, uh-oh. So and the thing that was really interesting, like I wish there could have been we could have done a little sociological experiment in a way it was, where the black men and women that saw that piece, it stopped them in their tracks. And it was a young boy in a suit with a noose around his neck. Now he doesn't look dead or harmed. He's just in a suit looking very proud, looking off into the distance, but there's a noose there.
Mm-hmm.
So again, when the black and black men and women saw it, they stopped in their tracks. And I saw them, sometimes they'd be 10 or 15 feet away from me and they would look at it, they would nudge each other, look at it, say something to each other, nod, and just kind of knowingly, just kind of walk away and I felt like, okay, that landed. Or sometimes they'd walk up to me and ask me a question. The people that it seemed to really upset, ironically, or maybe not ironically, were white people. When I saw a white man or white woman walk by and I could tell they were looking at that piece, they would stop in their tracks and then come over to argue with me. And I just thought that was really an interesting thing of, all right, well, why is this upsetting you? So then now, instead of an artist, now I'm a psychologist trying to help them work through their issues when all I really want to do is sell some art. So, I should have had a couch and a little pipe and maybe a tweed jacket with the patches on the sleeves. Tell me about your childhood. Where did you grow up? What did your father do for a living?
Yeah.
So it was just really interesting that the split of reactions was truly on racial lines. I guess it shouldn't be that surprising, but the idea that one group was upset and one group wasn't was really interesting to me.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the kind of conversation I've been having. It's either been something, comments of support and questions about how it was done or why,
Mm-hmm.
and then really visceral, almost angry, confrontational conversations, which in the end is a pretty good thing.
Yeah, and I'm right there with you in terms of we create this work, and when you create works, you assume that you've thought through all the possible thoughts and emotions and reactions someone can have to it. But once you're in that place and they ask you a question that was so unexpected, or make a comment that was so unexpected, you really don't know like why you're saying what you're saying. It's almost like they caught you off guard.
Right.
So yeah, I know the experience that you speak of, and definitely different races, ethnicities, everyone kind of brings their own biases to the table when they're viewing art, especially. But like you said, there's works that you make that are willing to call people to like face up to something or speak to a point that has been avoided for a long time.
Yeah.
So I think that's really cool.
And I felt really good after that art fair. It was almost like a crash course. It was almost like a graduate level classroom critique situation where I had to defend myself for 4 days in a row. And at the end of it, I walked away from that feeling really good. It was like, all right, like it snapped my brain onto a track where I feel super confident explaining myself.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was ultimately a really good thing.
Yeah. So I know you've been doing East and West Austin studio tour for the last few years. And congrats on being a Thirsty Planet artist.
Yeah.
By Big Medium and Thirsty Planet. So we'll definitely hop into that later.
Sure.
But yeah, I know from showing during East and West, you really get the full gamut of viewers. So that's definitely like putting you through the ringer.
Yeah.
And, getting all different mentalities to pour into your work. Have you ever found yourself changing or walking away with different storylines to add into your work after these discussions?
There are, yeah, because, questions will, like you said, hit you from a different angle and spur you to thinking about things in a different way. There was a woman who bought a pretty controversial looking piece a few years back. And, we're standing there going through the transaction. And I just kind of, just as I'm, essentially a goofball at heart. So I just kind of asked her while we were waiting for this transaction to go through, I just said, that the piece you bought's not really breakfast nook material. Like, where are you going to hang this thing? And she goes, I want this smack in the entryway to my home because it will instantly communicate where I'm coming from. And it will, she talked about how, people in her family and her friend circle, she had a hard time breaking through to the, talking about issues of race. But she was like, this piece, like it's going to be unavoidable. We're going to have to talk about it. So she bought it because she liked it, but she also bought it as like this conversational fulcrum to get into conversations that she felt she couldn't get into. So I just thought, like, wow, like you're buying this piece as like a sledgehammer to make people talk and think about things. Like that was pretty stunning. So that sort of thing makes me kind of changed a bit of how I talk about the work. Like, oh man, this isn't just somebody wanting an interesting image. Like this goes deeper than that. So, and that was like 2017, I want to say. So ever since then, it's been like, okay, yeah, this is a lot deeper than just what I think. This is what the viewer thinks as well. So yeah, that's been a big deal.
Yeah. And I mean, I love that. I love the power that you can put into art. There's something we talked a little bit about was, the value of art for art's sake, but creating art to inspire and really start these conversations. It takes a lot out of us, but, it has these massive returns when we actually get to share it with people and see how they're influenced, see how, they are recharged and want to create for themselves. Do you ever find like part of what you do is to kind of just inspire others to speak their own voice and like raise their voice as artists?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, because so I participated in the Other Art Fair. It's called the Other Art Fair last year. So I'm in this auditorium or this convention center, and it was great to talk to all those artists about why they do what they do. And then I had people tell me that they had been following me and had maybe not changed what they did, but changed what they do, but changed how they wrote and talked about what they do, which was staggering. Like, wait a minute, like of all the people to follow, don't don't do what I do. Like that's bad advice. So the idea that somebody was looking at my work as an inspirational thing was kind of yeah, that was something to have that thought in my head. But then as I thought about it more, I thought about all the people that inspire me, and we're all inspiring each other. And I've been a fan of your work for a while. So yeah, like that makes perfect sense that creative people will take from one another bits of inspiration and bits of, even if it's reading someone's artist statement and you're like, oh, I didn't think about that aspect of that whole thing. So I was reading your statement and you were talking about how often what you want to do is show the person and get past the outer identity. So the bright colors that you're using. And so that made me start thinking, well, this is more about the personal identity rather than the holistic identity. So yeah, that was just a very interesting thing. So yeah, I think that inspiration thing goes both ways, you know.
Interesting. I appreciate you for that. But yeah, I always think it's really important, as you said, to remember the history, but also keep our eyes set on, you know, what the future looked like to us and to those that we're reminiscing on. And
Yeah.
you know, that idea that all of us seeing each other equally is still such a utopic idea. It like baffles me and hurts me. And so like, you know, trying to put these kind of messages into our work has been a big driving point for me. But I also see you do a lot of landscape stuff, which like me, I just kind of can't stay in one area of creation. I kind of have to branch out. Can you tell us a little bit about that flow of like how you jump from different things? Is it normal? Is it hard? What do you think about it?
It is it's a mood thing, I guess, which, you know, not to sound like the stereotypical artist, but it's like whenever, I don't know, it's like and honestly it started as a break, taking a break from some of the heavier stuff I was doing. Um so if you look at the earlier landscapes, they're sort of devoid of any particular message, but that this other message has been filtering into those landscapes and the use of text and things. So it's like I can't get away from it. You know what I mean? Like even something that was supposed to be just making something beautiful, now there's still, you know, references to um, pain and injustice and protest. And I just, it was because I thought about the metaphor of race in America and comparing it to a mountain range. Um, you know, earlier civilizations, mountains were almost something to be worshipped, but then there were also these natural borders that were hard to get past, and people would die trying to get past them. So I love that metaphor. So now the landscapes are sort of dovetailing with some of the work, just thinking about race in America. But to answer the original question, um, yeah, it's a thing where I'm like, I just, you know what, I feel like I'm gonna take it easy tonight when I make something. I want to do something that's just sort of, let me get away from all the pain and just focus on some landscapes. And it's just really, the other work is intense. That work is a little more relaxing. Like it's a little more, I wouldn't say fun, but just, you know how when you're creating something, you forget time. You know what I mean? Like you might start at 7 o'clock and next thing you know, it's midnight and you've just been working and it's just been this enjoyable experience and you haven't been thinking about anything. That's what the landscapes do. It's like just gets me out of my head more.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. There's something about just setting up a floral, like a little bouquet of flowers and painting it.
Yeah.
It is like, it's like hitting the restart button.
Yep.
You know,
Yeah.
you just kind of remember like, oh, these are just pretty colors, just making a pretty visual, like I'm a human and I'm allowed to feel all different feelings, right? All different emotions can be filtered through me as an artist, you know? And so, with that said, and thank you for sharing.
Yeah, man.
If you want to talk a little bit about some of your upcoming shows, what happened with Thirsty Planet.
Yeah, I can jump into that, but I do. A question has been asked in the on the chat. I just want to answer that question real quick. So the question is, what kind of arguments were white viewers saying? And a lot of those questions were, or comments rather, more than questions, were along the lines of that maybe my work was glorifying slavery or glorifying the pre-civil rights era. But my rebuttal was, and it just sort of came to me on the spot when I was in Dallas. Like the argument was, look at the faces. So I've never created a single face that looks defeated. Like every face, even if there's some horrific metaphor going on in the image, it's the faces are defiant, the faces are proud. So the overarching issue from certain people was, oh, you're glorifying or you're looking for guilt or that sort of thing. And I'm like, nah, 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 nah. The message is, despite all of those things, look at the pride. Despite all of those things, look at the resistance. So yeah, I just wanted to answer that question real quick. Yeah, the Thirsty Planet thing was really cool because I applied like I'm sure a bunch of artists did, and then I forgot about it. So when I found out I got it, it was like Christmas. It's like I got whenever I see congratulations in the first bit of the email, I instantly think, oh, this is spam. You know what I mean? Like, but it was like, wait, big, medium, congratulations, what? So when I saw what it was, I was like, oh my God. And I just didn't expect it. And it was just a great thing. And it's been a great thing. And so much fun to go over to the brewery and meet Gabe, the brewer. And we sat down and talked about, what kind of beers we like. And I had it in my head that I wanted to do a very specific thing. I won't reveal. I'll let them reveal the flavor and all that good stuff. Keep the surprise. But the idea was the notion of what pubs, public houses were supposed to be, like places where people would come together, and the idea that art is also that. Like, there's this really nice connection between gathering around a piece of art or gathering around a drink and just talking about things, that I was aiming for with the discussion around what's going to be on the packaging and the label. So yeah, that's been a really, really fun process, and interesting that when your art is going to be representing an actual product, there can be some misgivings about that. But this is just a weird confluence of things happening in the zeitgeist, where there were discussions around Uncle Ben and Aunt Jemima and what is it, cream of wheat and things like that. Excuse me. That in Texas, of all states, there are going to be black faces and black bodies on a product in a store that aren't cliche, that aren't pandering in a certain way. And they're going to be very defined and almost, well, I don't know how you can get stronger than defined, but almost like in your face type imagery.
Yeah.
And I love that. Like, I don't know how long it's going to be in the store, probably a month or two. But yeah, the notion that, all right, we're getting rid of that, Uncle Tom step and fetch it imagery, and here's some very visceral, in your face, aggressive imagery. And I just can't wait to see what's going to happen. Like, it's going to be, I'm sure people are going to stop. There will be a certain subset of people that will see that and get angry and get tense when they see it. And that kind of makes me happy.
Yeah, I mean, that is super rare in terms of any business's marketing plan.
Yeah.
Polarizing their audience was never part of the game, but 2020 has been so unexpected for so many different ways. Just the idea of that being allowed and
right,
allowed,
and encouraged. Yeah,
encouraged.
One of the first things, because like you said, I've been a designer for 20 something years. So my very first thought was, are y'all sure y'all want me? Like, because the name of the game is to move some product, right? And I didn't want to do something that was going to get in the way of that. But to their credit, the first thing they said was, do what you want to do.
That's awesome.
Like, just do whatever you want to do. So I was like, all right.
Yeah, and they didn't turn back on it.
They didn't turn back on it, yeah. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing that.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to seeing that, getting a case for myself.
Yeah, man.
What this mystery flavor is.
Yeah, maybe, we'll need to get together and sit 6 feet apart and have some beers.
There we go. That's pretty awesome. So looking forward to that. I know you have a show coming up in December. Would you like to give us a little bit of info on that?
Yeah, so I can talk about my first show first. So I had So yeah, you're right. I did East, West, East, West. I did a couple of group shows here and there. But in January of last year, I had my first solo show, and I didn't know what I was doing. And I just showed up with way too much work for the walls. It was at the Doherty, and thank goodness I had a friend with me who kind of talked me out of 4 or 5 pieces, because she was like, "That's going to be ridiculous. Like, think about that wall. It's that that that." So she helped me hang it, and it was just all new to me, and I was so manic about just doing it and doing the promo for it and all that stuff that I don't know if it was just such a rush of things to take care of that I didn't really think about it all that much. But this new show, so there's a show in December at Ivester Gallery over at Canopy, and I've had a year to think about it. So the work that's going to be there was created for a show that was supposed to happen in May. COVID happens, things get pushed back, and so the work that's going to be there has been thought about for quite some time, and those pieces have been chosen to be together. Like, the first show was just whatever I got, let me just show a bunch of stuff. But this show has been very specific, and I'm really looking forward to what that will mean in terms of the conversation. And because of the quarantine, so the first show, I was just worried about bodies. I was treating it like it was a club show or something. Let me get as many bodies in there as possible. But this one, because of how the limited, admission will be, like, people will be able to just sit with pieces for a while. So that's going to be an interesting thing, where they're not going to be jostled by people. There's not going to be a big crowd, so they'll be able to just stand in front of a piece for several long minutes and really take it in. It'll be quiet. It won't have the club setting of what the previous thing was. I mean, I made that place look like a bar. It was ridiculous. I had friends and family in there. It was like nobody could see the work. It was just ridiculous. It was ridiculous.
Understand.
But that's because I was terrified that no one was going to be there. Like, so anyway, that a little insight into my insecurity.
No, that's a good thing to do.
But yes, so this one's going to be interesting in that it's going to be in a proper gallery, and it will be these quiet moments so people will have to really think about this stuff. So I'm really looking forward to that. That'll be in December.
I know you don't have an exact date on that, but will we be able to get that on your website? Or
yeah, I'll the gallery and I will both be publicizing it and promoting it. If you followed my Instagram at all, which is just McClinton, you'll know that I can't help but promote things because I just get excited about stuff. So it'll be hard to miss. I'll make sure it's hard to miss.
Awesome. And I see we have another question.
Yeah, that the beer will be ready.
Beer will be.
Yeah, I think it'll be ready late October, early November.
Awesome.
And I'm not sure how long it'll be up. I think it'll be in the store maybe a month or two. This is the 3rd year they've done it. So more details will come out soon. But yeah, I think that's the goal.
Okay, very cool. We'll be on the lookout for both of those.
Yeah.
One thing that you talked about a little bit was marketing yourself. And I find artists that start in the design field or start with design schooling, such as you or myself, we kind of have marketing and advertising built and burned into us. So I feel it feeds our fine art career quite differently from our compadres, if you will.
Yeah, definitely.
You notice that?
It's interesting when you stop, and I guess it depends on what you did first, because it could go either way. But most of the time, it's design first, then art later. That there's this, it never goes away, the sense of presentation and the sense of how you put things out there, and how you even write about it, and what your site looks like and what your social media looks like. That I think a lot of artists might overlook the value of promoting it. I think the notion of making art for art's sake and not worrying about whether or not anyone's going to buy it, not worrying about the commerce, is a fine fine way to think of things, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if you're making the art and you want to move toward just think about just purely distribution. You want your artwork in front of as many eyeballs as possible. So at least that's what I would think an artist would want. Like, you want your stuff out there and you want people to react to it. So the idea of promotion and promoting well and promoting in a clever, timely way is something that, as a designer, just sort of came second nature to me. But it also feeds into a little bit of my own paranoia, is that I've always felt like I didn't promote myself as a designer as much as I should have earlier in my career. And I sort of made a concerted decision a few years ago, like, I'm not going to make that mistake with the art. I'm going to annoy. Like, I told my friends back in 2016, I was like, hey, if you're following me on Instagram, you may want to unfollow me because it's going to get nuts. And it truly has. If you see how many posts I've made over the last few years, it's ridiculous. But that's just me. I just don't want to have left anything on the table. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's more than fair, and I respect that. I always judge myself where I'm falling short in those aspects, but as long as good work is being made, I feel like that justifies taking a break.
Yeah.
I know, that's great. Is there anything else you'd like to share in terms of where you're going with your art, or what you want to see with it in the future?
I think that so the first couple of pieces, when I first figured out this thing I'm doing, with the portraits and the bodies, they were like, you can sort of tell the era by how noisy all the work was. I just felt like I had to fill every nook and cranny of the space. And things have been, as I go forward, things have been getting more and more minimal, so to speak. And if there is a texture, it's really pointed and specific. So I feel like I'll be whittling the work down, or how I make the work down, to where I'm getting really kind of minimal with it. And the other thing that's happening is I'm showing more of the head to toe body. And because I'm getting good at, forming the bodies, sort of basically drawing, which is really hard to draw with a mouse, but I'm getting really good at it. So I'm really enjoying that aspect of it. And the notion of what a quiet background and an active body, those two things combined really add a sense of action and violence to the piece. And I know it's 2D, but, two-dimensional, but the idea that I can elicit a sense of angst and urgency is something where I really want the pieces to feel like they're jumping off the wall. So I don't know about stylistically where I'm going with the work, but certainly the ethos behind it is I want it to be active. I want it to feel, because I've been feeling like, as a Black man in Texas, I feel like I've been running for 40 years, 40 plus years. And I want to get that across, that ever since my first moment of being hit and smacked in the face with racism, it's never stopped. From once that first thing happened in second grade, Lone Star Elementary, New Braunfels, Texas, when that thing happened, it's been brutal ever since. And I just kind of want to get that sense that a Black body is always fighting, running, defending constantly. So that's where it's going in terms of the philosophy behind it. But who knows stylistically? I change how I feel about textures. I change how I feel about colors all the time. So I don't know that that'll ever settle into anything.
Yeah, because one thing I did want to talk to you about, kind of ask you about, is that transition to figures, whether, it was because of, like you kind of described, contextually it described a full form running away, kind of that advancement, as well as technical proficiency and just getting used to rendering the full bodies.
Yeah, the bodies and the faces are all essentially me. like metaphor. As I'm creating them, I'm thinking about that. So if you see two figures running, they're both me. And the way I'll explain that is, um, I don't have to be, but I feel compelled to be different people in different situations. So, the Dave that you might get at home at Thanksgiving with my family is not at all the Dave you're going to get when I'm being pulled over, or, I'm talking to a police officer, or I'm walking in for a job interview, or I'm at work, or whatever it is. Because sometimes it feels very much like you can't be your whole self in these certain places. And I don't think that's a uniquely Black experience, but it's a much more intense Black experience, I think. Again, just my opinion. So I guess what I'm trying to get across is what it feels like. And really just trying to convince myself, when I see that piece, I think, okay, yeah, that's what it feels like to be Black to me. So that piece is ready. So when I feel like I've communicated that, then it goes out to the world. So yeah, just trying to communicate through a 2D, as I said, a 2D art form is a really challenging but fulfilling thing when you feel like you've hit the nail on the head, and then it's ready to put out to the public.
Yeah, I mean, to me, that's really powerful in terms of to find that level of self-identification in like a full body of work. Is very, maybe hard is the right word, but hard for a lot of artists if they don't see their own self-portrait directly reflected. So just using those stories and being able to kind of project them through other essences is really powerful. And it always, I feel like that's the most grounding kind of art, is like it's always built on personal struggles and personal connection.
Yeah.
So maybe that's another reason why we gravitate towards your work and like feel that rawness.
Yeah, I certainly hope so. And I think just judging by, as I've said, there's no better feeling than when somebody's walking by and they see your work and they stop, or they double over, or they clutch their pearls, or whatever it is they do. I've seen all those reactions when they're looking at my work. It just feels so good. Even if I know, oh, here comes another problem, it still feels good. Like, wow, I got him. I got that thing I wanted. That visceral reaction. So yeah, it's figuring out a way to come back and be an artist after 20 something years of being a graphic designer it's been a very fulfilling new chapter for me.
Yeah. Would you say the last 5 months during COVID has enabled you to kind of focus into your work in a different way, especially with all of the movements going on?
Well, it's been strange. So I work for a small design studio now, but before that I was solo, like just a freelance independent designer for 10 years. So I got very used to just being isolated and being by myself and doing the work. And now, so when this new thing came about, my first reaction was, I'll be fine. Like I'm used to being alone. I'll be fine. What I didn't really realize was how important the hanging out was, and how important the seeing my friends, and even just going to the store and going into the office, all those things are actually more important than I thought. So the work has been, I don't know if the work has changed, but the work has felt more important because it's this way to emote. When I'm just answering emails and doing that, who cares? But when I'm doing the work, it's like a huge opportunity to, all right, now I can actually communicate something with some emotion where, if it weren't during, if this quarantine weren't happening, I don't know that I would have honed in on the relief that the work gives me sometimes. So I guess to answer the question, COVID has made me focus and allowed me to focus on the work and get fulfillment from it in a way that I don't know that I was really focused on before. So yeah, so I guess there has been a positive, circle back around to it. It has been a positive in that I feel a little more connected because it's my life raft kind of.
That's very interesting. You know, it is weird how sometimes we find that communal presence with our artwork, and understand that a lot of people can't let go of their artwork. But I wanted to kind of, into a sidebar, I know that you don't make many prints of your work.
Yeah.
If you can speak to like the value of your work, and you know, if people are looking at your works and want to actually procure a piece, or you know, just find out more about it,
Yeah.
sooner is probably better rather than later, right?
Yeah, yeah. You're right. I do extremely limited editions. And part of that was to mitigate, again, I'm always in my head, on my own head. So the chip on my shoulder and that worry about whether or not people would value the work, because it is created digitally. So theoretically, I could print thousands of them,
Mm-hmm.
sell them for $10 a piece. But I didn't want those thoughts out there as a commodity. So I decided early on that each piece was going to be, so for instance, a perfect square piece would be, 24 by 24 inches. It would be available once. It'd be available 36 by 36, and 48 by 48, each size just once.
Mm-hmm.
Because I want there to be this implied sense of value. And again, I don't want it to be like, I'm putting my work on mugs. Let's get it out there. Let's move it, put it on a t-shirt, put it on a shower curtain, get it out there. Like, I wanted it to be, if you walked away with that piece, it was only going to exist one or two other times.
Yeah.
So because I want people to take that story with them, and it's the only, it's not a product, so to speak. It's like, you get to have that story now, and you get to incorporate that story into how you feel about the world, and your friends and family get to see it, and you get to use that art to filter your opinions through and put it out in the world, and that's a wonderful thing.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the reasoning behind the limited edition stuff. So yeah, that's how I do it, and I don't think I'll change how I do it. I've had a bunch of artists have told me I shouldn't do that, that I should sell as many as I can of every piece, and like, I don't know, man. I'm not selling records over here. I'm just making art.
Well, I definitely value and I respect you immensely for wanting to do that, especially somebody that comes from that marketing and advertising background. It's almost like second nature to find the most profitable form within those, right? So just the level, that value, that respect that you have of your own work is something that I think is massive in the time period that we're in, where social media is just this, like, how quickly can I create and throw it up and try and make sales?
Yeah.
Using deceased people to make money or this and that, just.
Yeah. That's a weird thing, right? Like, we talked about that before. Like, I mean, the things that are happening in this country are certainly the inspiration for a lot of the work I'm making, but I couldn't imagine using a specific reference of someone who got killed and then making a buck off of it. I just couldn't.
Right.
I couldn't do it. Now, if it's become a historical thing, I think that's different. But I'm talking like in the instance that it's happening, you see all the artwork that's based on people that have gone, and I do understand that might be the only way they could express themselves. That might have been the only way for them to get that off their chest.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't want to step on what they were doing, because who knows what the true motivation was. But for me, just making it a product just seems weird to me. But then again, I am selling at least one or two of them. So, is that a hypocritical stance? I don't know. I guess we could debate that for forever, I guess.
Right. I guess we should put the disclaimer that as designers and illustrators and artists, it's a normal practice to stay within pop culture and create images of pop culture. And I know you and I have probably been involved in it to some degree in our past, but I think we just want to focus that, like, creating work after the fact, you know, kind of changing your angle to be profitable is what kind of harks us, you know, but anyone is allowed to do whatever makes them happy.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
I guess you're right. I should preface every time I bring that up or every time that comes up, I should explicitly say, hey, this is just my
right.
opinion. Because there are other aspects of work I make. I do some abstract stuff and some truly pop culture stuff that I'll sell those for, you know, $50 a pop forever. Like, because they don't have the same emotional resonance as the portrait stuff I do. So like there are two different things in my body of work, that one I hold dear and really emotional, and the other one is just like, that's just fun stuff. I don't really care so much. It's like I'm not as invested as I am the portrait stuff.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. That's a great way of putting that and kind of clarifying that mentality. Because I know you do the portraits and the landscapes and beautiful logos. Are there other ways you kind of break out?
Yeah, you know, I don't think I'll ever stop doing logos.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. I love the idea that somebody has an idea, somebody has a business or an organization, and then it has to be encapsulated in something that will hit, in some cases, particularly on a business card or even a website, technically, there's just this tiny little area. Now, most of the logos are contextual. So if you land on a website, you'll see what it's about. So the logo doesn't have to be the home run every time. But I do like the idea that there's this tiny little area that has to communicate all the hopes and dreams of a business or an organization. And it can make for some really emotional, and I'm talking about emotional arguments over art. My God, the arguments I've had over logos, and how I've had to talk clients out of just marketing disaster. Like, no, you don't
Right.
really don't want to do that. You know, and as a designer, it's been interesting that it's a field that I never knew there were going to be so many experts and I'm saying experts, designers in the world. Every client I've ever had would dictate specifically what's happening, and I always kind of wondered to myself, like, do you do that with a plumber?
Right.
You
Now
know,
your electrical is done.
right. If you have an electrician working on something in your home, do you look over their shoulder and go, no, that wire doesn't go there? Like, well, then wire the house yourself. So,
Yeah,
it's been, I think there's no way to get away from human nature and arguments and conversations. Like,
yeah.
art, design, it's all the same thing. Everybody's going to have an opinion, and you just jump in and muddle through the best you can.
Yeah, and I remember we were talking about it last time, and just that the way that financial stress is connected to design. You know, people feel so much more inclination to have a say over what happens, whether they're informed or not, whether that decision will help them or not. You know, just that need to control and guide the process is a huge part of design clients.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people think about, like, particularly for a logo, they want to like it, even if they don't fit into the demographic of what their product or offering or service is. I was doing something for a gentleman brought me the project, but his target audience was teenagers.
Mm.
But he kept trying to get me to do something that felt like an old wooden painted sign, because that's what he grew up with. And I had to keep, going back, hey, man, this is what we agreed the audience for this product was. So it kind of, your logo isn't for you. Your logo is for your audience.
Right.
So that conversation happens all the time, which, again, circle back to art. Who is my audience? My audience is kind of everybody. So that's a lot different than specifying, who a logo is for. The art is for all comers. Like, let's get, you either like it, hate it, let's get into it. So I love that about the art, that it's just like, there it is. Everybody take a look, and slings and arrows. Let's go.
Right. I think that is a really great point in terms of, like, you're creating the art with the hopes that everyone will get a chance to react to it and, you know, kind of give their own feedback, because they're not technically investing in the creation of it. So,
Yeah.
you know, their weight of their comments are looked at completely different.
Yeah.
And so, you know, as you say that, I start to think about, so I lost track of thought there. But as you, sorry.
No, when you were talking about how people think about it and what their opinions mean, like is their input to the art or the design, when does it matter, when doesn't it matter, I think is where you were going.
Yeah.
The idea that, well, you know what, when it does matter, when someone wants, when it matters in art, is when someone is thinking about making a purchase. Again, some of my work is pretty controversial. So in the wrong context, my art could be used against my purpose, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
Depending on who bought it.
That's
So it could get funky out there in them streets when I'm trying to sell this work of like, who's buying it? You know what I mean? So yeah, intent and end use, I think, really does play into the artwork to some degree. I mean, if you're not thinking about it, you probably should be, depending on what, like if you paint, not to disparage people who paint bluebonnets, but if you're painting bluebonnets, that's not as controversial as what I do. It almost doesn't matter who buys that.
No,
But
you're right.
it might actually matter who buys my work.
Right. And
You know?
there are still definitely niches that your work will fit better in. And one thing that I talk to a lot of up and coming artists about is, you know, go where you're celebrated, not where you're tolerated. Right. So like take your art to the people that will grow from your work. Like if you have to find that group of people that actually are amplified and energized and inspired when they see your art, you're effectively like keeping them from it by just trying to get it to everybody. Right.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a very good point. I think we should probably revisit that conversation again soon, because I need to be told that, because my inclination is to take my art, well, it will cause the most upheaval and distress. You know what I mean? Like I want people running just running to the hills of
Yeah.
the conversation. I want people gathering torches and pitchforks to come after me because I've upset them with my word. Like, I'm not joking. Like,
Yeah.
so
Your goal,
you're right though. Your way of thinking is right. Like, my way of thinking is just being antagonistic. So I should probably listen to you.
that is funny. No, I totally respect your goals with your work. But yeah, I find that interesting that you can kind of get to the same point by going two completely different routes. You kind of end up at that same point either way.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. Yeah. Was there anything else you wanted to touch on? Wanted to make sure.
No, I think we did it. I mean, I think the Thirsty Goat or Thirsty Planet stuff that promotion will take care of itself.
Mm-hmm.
And again, if anybody wants to follow me or see more of my work, it's just I love that I have a really easily Googleable name. Like, I'm glad it's not Smith or Jones. It's McClinton, McClinton. I'm easy to find on Instagram, and just Google my name. And
What are your other Instagram pages?
It's just McClinton Design and McClinton Landscape. I'm real easy to find.
Awesome.
And so yeah, if you follow one of those, you'll see promotions for the show. Like, it'll be hard to miss.
All right, very cool. Did anyone have any questions? Let's see. All right, from Lauren Tarbell, we have, it's so inspiring to hear you speak, Dave. I so admire your work and really appreciate your candor, advice, and vulnerability. I'd love to ask about emotional responses to your work. What is the most memorable experience you can recall of having someone react to your work?
I had so not to get into anybody's head and imagine that I truly know where they're coming from, but one of the things that always happens, or that happens a lot, is everyone, I've run across so many, at every time I've had a show, I've run across uh, a white person who has said that they had a sharecropper in their family. The amount of white people who have picked cotton or have ancestors who have picked cotton and think that that's some sort of congruous, sympathetic experience. And then I don't call them on it, but I can tell they're coming from a place of guilt and anger. So, and I've heard like quivering voices, and I don't know if it's emotion or anger. I don't know what it is, but I've had so many conversations that are incredibly emotional that I can't tell what's about to happen. Like there have been some conversations where I've kind of stepped back, assessed, like, all right, fight or flight. What am I doing here?
Mm.
Because it's been the anger and the emotions that bubble up. It's sometimes astonishing. On the other side of that, I've had older black men and women like 60s, 70s see my work and come up and shake my hand, and I'm instantly transported to being a kid in church with all the deacons and all the older people around me, and they thank me for the work.
Mm.
So then that's a whole different emotion. Like that's where you almost kind of want to well up a little bit. Like here's this person who's been through hell as an American, and they're thanking me for something I created because it made them feel a certain way. Like that. Like so, I've had both ends of those emotional that emotional seesaw of fear, anger, gratefulness. I don't know that I could pinpoint a specific conversation because it can all be shocking. I do remember one gentleman telling me that because he worked with two black men in the 70s and he never heard them complain about race, that he didn't think there was a race problem. Like, all right. I don't know what to say to that, bruh. Good luck with that line of thinking.
Right.
I don't know a specific thing that I can answer that question perfectly with, but I would say that it really has run the gamut from the mundane to the almost fear level to the gratefulness, almost want to cry level.
Mm. And that's powerful. And I mean, I know for me, those are the interactions that recharge me and remind me like this is of value and you're actually affecting multiple communities, and even getting people to like look back at the people they worked with and they're like, was there potentially some like racial innuendos or things going on that I didn't realize at the time? So I think that's very powerful that your work can still do that.
Yeah, it's been a really interesting thing, and when I first started making work, it was just to honestly to put stuff on my walls. I wasn't really thinking I was ever going to show it to anybody.
Hmm.
So the idea that I'm here talking about my work to you and for this group of folks is a little mind blowing. When I think it's just been 5 years, just making work or showing work for 5 years, and here I am talking about it like that. To some people like that, just still mind boggling.
Yeah. Well, I've definitely been honored to speak with you.
Yeah, man, you
Get
too.
to know more about your process, know more about the people with pickets and different different tools that will be chasing you down.
Yeah, man.
I'm excited for it all.
Yeah, man. Well, yeah, it was great talking to you too. And then, like I said, I've been a fan of your work for a while. I've been following you for a while. So the idea that this coffee talk, this thing got us to meet each other it's awesome. I love that. I'm
Agreed.
definitely going to be seeking you out and to hang out some. I definitely will be doing that.
Oh, we'll have some thirsty planets for sure.
Yes, sir.
Did anyone else have any questions? Wanted to jump in and ask him anything directly before we wrap this up? Oh, we still got him. All right. I know we went over quite a bit today.
Yeah.
All right. right. I think that's it.
Cool, man. Well, that was fun.
Yeah. Hope everyone enjoyed. Thanks for tuning in, getting to know more about Dave. Let me check. Make sure I'm not missing anything. Awesome. So yeah, one other question I did have, and you kind of talked about it. You talked about how your work became more simplified over the years and over the process. I know for me as a designer, especially when you're working with textures, you kind of run out of or overuse some textures, and
Yeah.
it gives you a new focus
Yeah.
in terms of application. Did you experience that in like a different way, or?
So I'm really glad you brought that up because I'd forgotten about it. So there was this artist named Nancy Spero, last name Spero, and she did these collages with painting and cut metal of faces and bodies that she had drawn, and she used them and photocopied them, and then had those printed to metal and would use them over and over and over again, so that you would see a brand new drawing. It would look nice and sharp, and a photocopied version of that very same drawing that had been degraded. And she just kept using them because she had this message, this thing she was trying to get out of her system and onto the canvas or onto the wall. And I saw her work on one of those PBS, what are those called? The 2021 PBS, R21? Yeah.
R21.
Yeah. So I saw her on one of those. And again, this is before I was making work, and it was like this instant permission to hammer an image into the ground. If you were still trying to get it out of your head, it's okay. Like, it's okay to use stuff over and over again. So that said, there are certain textures that I love reusing because of the metaphorical value they've got. So have you ever looked at up close stretched leather? You know, and sometimes it'll have perforated holes. And then from radiating from those holes will be like cracks, like little fissures. And metaphorically, it's a really easy leap to view those as bullet holes. And I'm not through talking about that yet. So I'll probably use that texture over and over again until I feel like I've gotten that off my chest. And frankly, as a Black man in America, I'll probably never have the opportunity to get that off my chest. Like, that'll be a relevant topic for the foreseeable future.
So just be ready for a lot of leathers, what you're saying.
I mean, you'd be ready. Yeah, it's the brutality is not going away because in my art, because the brutality of this country is not going away. So, I do use things over and over again. But for me, it's not a challenge. It's almost like, again, I always revisit the work of people who inspire me, and I'm like, well, if someone on that level is doing that, reusing elements, then I feel like, all right, well, just philosophically, I feel vindicated that, yeah, I can keep doing that too. And the minimalism's like this piece right behind me is really minimal. And getting back to the edition thing, so that's actually off the market because when I got it back, it just smacked me in the face and looked so great. I was like, oh, I'm not selling that.
I love it.
That'll just be there forever. So yeah, no, but that's a really interesting take on, how you feel about materials and textures. For me, it's all part of the message, and as long as that message still resonates within me, I'll probably keep using a lot of the elements and textures that I have been using.
Cool. I appreciate you answering that because that's something I know everyone gets their own sensibilities. So like ingrained from just creating so much work, you don't realize you're the only one thinking like this.
Yeah. You're the only one worried about it. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's cool. I'll be going through and seeing if I notice anything similar, or, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
You also, I know in your portraits, you would also change the eyes and kind of adjust the eyes in different ways.
Yeah,
Can you
there's
tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, there's a lot of metaphors going on there. So I don't know if you know the history of Belgium in the Congo and Rwanda. So a lot of the horrific things that had gone on in those two countries and in the continent of Africa at large Europe just decimated the resources and the communities there. But in particular, the idea that anger and hostility between two different tribes was amplified by European influence has always just I always just hurts to just think about that. So I use a Belgian coin for eyes a lot. And then there's another coin that was struck by Britain in, I want to say 1831, because they were celebrating the fact that they had abolished slavery, but they never stopped profiting from slavery. Like they weren't bringing in slaves, but they were bringing in all the money from slavery. They didn't mind that. So I use that coin a lot for eyes. So there's a lot of metaphorical pieces that I don't always explain what they mean or where they come from. There's so many other different aspects of it, but it's just to filter a black body looking at you through commerce. I mean, if I think that's a pretty easy leap philosophically to imagine what I'm talking about. And even if it isn't, if you ask the question and I'm around and I can answer the question, it's an interesting extra layer we can put on the work and talk about what those metaphors mean and what I'm trying to communicate through them. So yeah, there's just so many details that when you see the work in person will elicit an extra layer of thought about overall what the work might mean.
Yeah, I mean, thank you for sharing that as well. And
yeah,
and that's powerful. The multitude of histories one piece can touch.
Yeah,
and still, give that unified vision that's still futuristic in terms of like, they're always looking for a brighter day, a new tomorrow, that stance of resilience.
Yeah.
Like I just absolutely love that. So
cool. Yeah, thanks.
It's very cool. All right. Wanted to check one last time if anyone had any questions or why you see certain things in his work. If not, don't worry, you'll definitely get a chance to see his upcoming show at Ivester.
Yep. And just on social media or through the website, if anybody has a question, you just email me too. I get questions all the time. So obviously just reach out. I'm pretty good about answering emails and DMs on Instagram. So if anybody has a question later, certainly I generally answer that stuff.
Very cool. And massive thank you to Big Medium for hosting the coffee chats and having Dave and myself on here.
Yeah, I feel really good about it. I feel really good about being asked. Like it was that came as a surprise as well. So yeah, I'm definitely grateful to Big Medium for that.
Definitely. All right.
All right, man.
Thanks everyone for joining.
Yeah, man. Appreciate your time.
Take care, Dave.
All right, dude. Have a good one.